All right, we're live. Hi, everybody. We are going to start going here in about a minute. Today, we're going to be talking about family sponsorships. We're going to be talking about spouse and common law and some conjugal, but we're going to focus on the spouse and common law sponsorships. All right, so as you can see, I have a different background because I'm now in my office. So during these COVID times, we've moved here, but we're still maintaining our distance. Okay, so that's great. So we're gonna get started here, but I have a surprise for today. I'm gonna bring in my my friend Norbert. Hi,
Hey,
Norbert. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. You having fun?
Oh, I sure am. And hello to everyone that's joining us. Great to be here.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is Norbert and I asked Norbert to join us because what we're going to do is we're going to go through family sponsorship, specifically with the spouse and common law stuff. And I just wanted to take the opportunity here to introduce Norbert. So Norbert and I work together. Norbert actually he spends a lot of time in family sponsorship files. We work on them together, but this is his jam, so to speak. He really enjoys those sponsorship files. So what we're gonna do is we'd like to keep it a little bit interesting today. Yeah, we're gonna go through, give you a bit of an overview. While at the same time, as always, if there's any questions or you just want to say hello, put it in the chat, and we'll go from there. All right, so let's get started. I'm just going to go through a bit of the overview here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do an overview of the sponsorship process. We're going to talk about the different types of sponsorship and what is best. And again, before you think, that stuff's pretty basic, it's actually pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to start planning. You have to start planning from the beginning, and you have to make sure that you're what's the word I'm looking for? You're very strategic in how you actually plan out your application in terms of being able to be successful. So that starts in those first two steps. The next thing that we'll be discussing is what should be in your application and also what shouldn't. All right, and this is where truly we depart from the checklist of what the government has, and we're going to talk about that as well and why that's important. We're going to talk about how to answer some of the questions on the government forms. Obviously, we don't have the time to go through all of the questions on the forms, but we would like to highlight some general rules. And then we're going to talk about some potential flags to the immigration officer. Okay, how's that sound, Norbert? We good?
Sounds great. Let's get
Awesome.
started.
So let's split this up. I had somebody here. We got somebody watching from the UAE, man. Hey, how are you? Not sure where you're at in the UAE, but either Dubai or I don't know, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi. Say hello. But it's great. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's get started, Norbert. Norbert, why don't you do the types of sponsorship?
Okay. So there's three types of sponsorship for your partner or spouse. The first is a spouse, someone that you're legally married to. I'll go through each of these a little bit more specifically. The second one is a common law partner, someone that you have been in a relationship with and living together for at least 1 full year. And the final category is a conjugal partner, someone that you have let's say, a physical relationship with for at least 1 year, but you're not living together per se because of various barriers. So just quickly though, a spouse then is someone that you've been legally married to in either a church or a civil ceremony, and it's recognized in the country where you got married as well as by the Canadian government. You must be 18 years of old. And you must be 18 years of old, and you must have been physically, for the most part, physically present, the two of you at your wedding. It can't be sort of like a proxy marriage anymore. Common law partners, the Canadian government recognizes couples that are not legally married, but they have been in a relationship and living together, supporting each other in various ways for at least a 12-month period. And a conjugal partner, these are applications that we don't get too many of, but these are situations where you can't be married or you can't physically be in a common law relationship because of various factors, such as let's say you're in a same-sex relationship and you're in a country where that's sort of forbidden, and that would be dangerous to be in that relationship openly, or where your partner is still legally married to someone, although they haven't been together for at least a year or so or more, but you have had conjugal or physical relationships with that person. In other cases, there are various barriers to immigration, such conflicts and other strife in the country. You just can't be together physically, but you are in a relationship. And it's not just sort of a sexual relationship. It has to also be shared support and responsibilities, even though you can't be together. So in terms of sponsoring someone, what makes you eligible to be a sponsor? You must be 18 years of age, must be either a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident of Canada. You cannot be on social assistance or in something like a undischarged bankruptcy. So you have to show that you're financially capable and not receiving government assistance. Another very important thing is that you must be able to provide for the basic needs of the person you're sponsoring. And we'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about what an undertaking is. And you must not be bound by a current undertaking of someone else. That means you can't be sponsoring someone else at the moment and still be in that undertaking. And another eligible factor is that you cannot have had a conviction or charge of a violent crime against you. Okay? So what makes you eligible as someone to be sponsored? Well, you must be in one of the three relationships here, either a spouse, common law partner, or conjugal partner. And generally, as the sponsored person, you must be admissible to Canada. You cannot have any criminal convictions that can't be overcome or any serious crimes that you committed. This could bar you from coming to Canada. So quickly, types of sponsorship. There's two main categories that we always discuss with people. That's an in-Canada sponsorship or what we call overseas sponsorship. It's basically out of Canada. So these are the two choices that you have. If you're a Canadian citizen, you can sponsor. If you're abroad as a Canadian citizen and you've married someone, you can sponsor them to come to Canada and live with you. If you're a permanent resident living outside of Canada, you cannot sponsor someone to come back to Canada with you. But let's just basically go over the differences between an in-Canada and an overseas sponsorship. In Canada means either both you and your spouse or partner are living here. And what that means is that you put in your application as an in-Canada sponsorship, but it has some advantages to an overseas sponsorship. One, it gives you the eligibility to apply for an open work permit. So the Canadian government recognizes that your spouse who's here might want to work. So if you do an in-Canada application, that means your spouse is here or your partner, and then you can apply for an open work permit. And if the government gets to the point where they think that they show that you are sort of eligible to sponsor someone, then that the applicant will get an open work permit, and they can work until in basically any type of job until that application is finalized. If you're someone that is currently in Canada, you can either apply as an in Canada or an overseas. So let's say you're in a situation where you're here on a visa, but you want to travel back home on a semi-regular or regular basis for whatever reason, then you can do that and apply as an out of Canada applicant, even though you're going to be coming back and forth, as long as you have the relevant visas that you need to be able to do that. But what that means is that you're not eligible for an open work permit. But one of the advantages of the out of Canada or overseas application is the processing time is generally fairly quicker. The Canadian government has committed to finalizing most spousal applications within a 12-month period, and we've been finding that the overseas applications can be done in several months shorter than the 12 months. And the reason behind that, I'll get into this a little bit more, but one of the objectives of sponsorship is that the government of Canada wants to facilitate family reunification. So they want you to be able to be together in the same place. The other thing about an in Canada sponsorship is that it means in Canada. It means that if you're applying from within Canada, you're expected to sort of stay in Canada until your application is finalized. They don't want you going out, because when you leave Canada, you could jeopardize that application. So those are the sort of the advantages. And also, I sort of alluded to this before, there's also, the Canadian government does recognize same-sex marriages and same-sex partnerships. So as long as your same-sex marriage is a legal marriage in the country you got married, and the Canadian government will recognize it. So you can sponsor someone same sex and gender as you. Brandon, I don't know if you wanted to add a few things to this.
Oh, Norbert, you know me so well. I was sitting there, but honestly, you covered most of it. The only thing that I was going to say is, again, you know me, I'm always talking about strategy here. And really, at the end of the day, one thing that we do with clients, and one thing that you need to do when you're planning this, the in Canada versus the overseas is a key question. And one of the things that you always need to ask is are you going to be doing a lot of traveling if you're going to be in Canada? Do you need to work? Processing times, as Norbert had highlighted, under IRPA, which is the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, which is the body of laws that actually covers sponsorship and immigration. One of the founding, or one of the principles of the act is to unify family. The other thing too that you'll see me do a lot, and I'm going to do it here because we like to do it, is spousal sponsorships, conjugal or common law. I like doing this. It's interconnected, right? You have to have an interconnected relationship, and that's key to any type of application that we're putting in. So we'll get into that a little later, but I always like to say that because, it's the common law or the conjugal. Obviously with the marriage, there's different things there, but again, the strategy side of it, what's best. Also with the same-sex sponsorship, what we're seeing is especially we deal with a lot of clients from Asia. So there's a lot of people a lot of different jurisdictions that are starting to open up there, which makes it a little bit easier to be able to facilitate that. All right. So, Norbert, you covered most of it, man. So you know how hard it is for me to sit for a while and not speak. So, so you got it, man. So let's move on to the next one. I'll let you do the next one. How about that?
Okay, let's move on. So the first part here, the goals of sponsorship, you just alluded to it, and I sort of mentioned it before, but as you said, under IRPA, the laws for immigration, the Canadian government is committed to unifying families, and that's the impetus behind spousal sponsorship as a pathway to permanent residency. So that's the main goal. The Canadian government is committed to that. I mean, there's other types of sponsorships that we're not going to get into today, but it also, there's dependent children that you can sponsor. But the whole point is they want family reunification. And like we said before about scheduling, that's one of the reasons why the overseas applications can get done much quicker than the in Canada ones, because they want your family to be together. Whereas if you're in Canada already and you've decided that you want to stay here, you don't need to travel, and you've chosen that pathway, you're already here. So, they generally would take, up to 12 months to do that sort of application, sometimes shorter, but they prioritize the overseas ones because of that goal and policy of family unification. So planning for successful application, Brandon sort of covered some of this already, is you have to plan ahead, and you have to think about what your goals are. like you said, and do you want to travel in and out of Canada if you're in that position where you don't require visas every time you come in and out? Let's say, you're in Canada with your partner or spouse, but you've got, let's say, elderly parents still outside the country, or you have a job that you need to travel a lot, so you can sort of decide. What was that? Wow. So that out of Canada one, if there's a lot of traveling that you need to do, that's probably the best option for you. Thinking about it as well in terms of, do you want to work or not? So that's another thing to plan ahead for in terms of which application style or which pathway you're going to take. The most important thing, though, again, is to know, if let's take the next 12 months of your life. Let's assume that your application will be done in the 12 months. What do you see yourself doing in those 12 months? If you're happy to stay here in Canada with your partner, day in, day out, and that means that you're staying here in Canada, so you can do that, the in Canada one, and do the open work permit. But it's important to sort of plan out the next, sort of think, what is it that you want while they're processing your application. So one of the important, for the sponsor, probably one of the most important things, and when you look at the government forms, there's a couple of big words on the forms. One is called the sponsorship agreement and the undertaking. Undertaking has such an ominous tone to it, right? I mean, it sounds like you're going to be working in a funeral home. But what is an undertaking? So the government of Canada says, yeah, sure, you can sponsor your spouse or partner to become a permanent resident and be with you forever in Canada. But you need to give us something in return, and that is an undertaking. And what this is, it's an agreement, a binding agreement between you, the sponsor, and the Minister of Immigration. And it's a 3-year agreement that you're signing, which basically says for those 3 years, the first 3 years that your partner is here as a PR, that you are responsible for your partner. In terms of, you need to be able to provide the basic necessities of life to them. You'll be responsible for their finances and everything. That doesn't mean that your partner can just stay at home and you're going to pay them to stay at home and all that. It just means that you're agreeing that if for some reason the applicant, the new PR, has to go on some sort of social assistance, that you are agreeing that you will make sure that all gets paid back. Basically, you're saying that you're taking care of them for 3 years, hopefully forever. But it's a financial undertaking, and it's a binding agreement. No matter what happens, if you get divorced or something within those 3 years, if you break up for those 3 years, you are still responsible for your partner's or spouse's basic financial needs, okay, or the necessities of life. So the application process, well, this is usually, the first step in what we like to talk about as a 3-step process towards your final goals of being in Canada forever. So the first step of that 3-step process is the application itself. And what the application includes, as Brandon said before, we don't just go by the checklist that the government puts up on their website. Yes, there's a number of government forms that you have to sign, both you as a sponsor and the applicant. But we go well beyond this checklist. You need to also put supporting documentation in there in your application. And one of the key things is, as Brandon used the term interconnectedness. The government likes to look at something they call genuineness of the relationship. And that's the key thing. The government does not want people sponsoring people with the goal of immigrating to Canada. You're sponsoring your spouse or partner because you're in love and you want to be together. It's a genuine relationship, and that's the key to all these applications, is that you need to put in the supporting documents necessary to show that genuineness. When Brandon and I do consults for potential spousal applications, we ask some really basic questions, and we just get right to the heart of the matter. Like, how did you guys meet? Describe your first meeting. Do you remember what your partner was wearing? stuff like that. And I mean, these are all the things that an immigration officer is going to be thinking about too while they're looking at your application. So you want to put in the supporting documents that show that you've been together as either a married couple, so that includes things like marriage certificates, photos from your wedding. If you're a common law partner and that's been living together for 12 months, and even if you're married or conjugal, you want to show interconnectedness in terms of like you're living together, you're supporting each other financially, you have shared bank accounts, shared credit card, well, maybe not credit cards, but maybe. Photos of your relationship together, emails between the two of you, texts between the two of you, letters from friends and family that can also attest to the genuineness of your relationship. So that's a huge part of the application. So there's that, and the government forms. I'm sure Brendan will chime in a second, but I'll just get to, you know what, I should have had an application next to me to show people what the amount of work that needs to go into a spousal application. Yeah, it's thick. I don't have one next to me. Should have thought of that, right? Next time. So it's not, a lot of people, you know, they think, oh, this is easy. I can do this all myself. I'll print off the 10-page document checklist that the government gives me, and I'll just put in the basics. And then, you know, 8-9 months later, they get a call from immigration for an interview or something, which is, you know, something that we generally do not get. But I'll let Brandon talk about that later. So once the application goes in, what happens after you submit it? So like all immigration applications, it's checked for completeness by the processing center where it's seen. So all applications, regardless of if you're in Canada or out of Canada, these are all paper-based applications still. Like a lot of other immigration programs that are now electronic with the Canadian government, these are still paper-based. And so they must be mailed into a case processing center here in Canada. So when that package goes in, the government goes through it, they go through their checklist, they go through the checklist that you put in, and they make sure that it's a complete package because they have to do that under the Immigration Act. They have to check for completeness. So what's the next step after that? Whether you're in Canada or out of Canada, once they've received it, they'll let you know, they'll give you an application number, which you need to refer to all the time when you're dealing with the government. Other things that happen now before you get your PR, one thing that you also need to include, because I mentioned criminality before, so the person being sponsored will need to include police certificates from every country they've spent 6 months or more in total since they were 18 years of age. Some countries, you cannot submit the police certificate with the application, and if you're from one of those countries, that's one thing the government will follow up with you for an update. They will ask you to provide that police certificate, and you need that letter to you need the Canadian government letter to get that police certificate. Other things they will ask you to do as the applicant, that is the person being sponsored, is you need to complete biometrics now. What that is photographs and fingerprints that you can do. If you're overseas, you can do it at a visa application center in your country or any country that you are allowed to actually have status in. If you're in Canada, this just started in December of 2019, you now have to also supply biometrics in Canada at Service Canada centers. If you get biometrics for a previous immigration application, like a temporary resident visa or a work permit, that are still valid, you still have to do the biometrics again for a permanent resident application. So it doesn't matter if you already have them, valid biometrics, they will ask you to do them again. For every permanent resident application, you have to redo them. The other thing they'll ask for on top of possible police requests of police certificates is also a medical exam. You also have to undergo a medical exam with a panel, what we call a panel physician. That's a doctor recognized by Immigration Canada, and on their website you can find these doctors throughout the world. Also, after submission, if there's any changes in your application, you need to inform the government. If you change your address, you need to inform the government. If you lose your job or you get a new job, you need to inform the government. If let's say you're expecting a baby all of a sudden since you submitted your application, you need to inform the government that a child is on the way. By not informing the government, you jeopardize the application down the road. So it's very important to always keep the government up to date with things. And also when you're dealing with your forms, I won't really get into the misrepresentation. I'll let Brandon talk about how to fill out those forms. But that's about what I have to say on this. Brandon, you want to add a few things?
No, you covered it all, man. Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, we're good. Let's move on to the next slide. Oh, what do we got here? Sponsorship. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to grab this, Norbert. Okay, so what should be in your application and what shouldn't be? So Norbert alluded to a number of different items that should be in there. However, what we call that is it's an R10 check, which is the regulation number 10, and basically it's a complete application. So that checklist that you get with your application, that is the bare minimum to pass the R10 check or the minimums. That doesn't mean that that's everything that needs to be in there, because what you need to keep in mind, and this is what we're always telling people, is that we oversubmit, because really at the end of the day, you're the one who's making the application to the government, okay? The onus is on you to prove that you meet the criteria of the application. So I don't want to be boxed in terms of, what I need to do for the government, because if I'm like following just the checklist, and I don't have something there, guess what? It's going to affect my application because the burden's on me to be able to do it. And this is the number one like rookie, like layman mistake, is they're like, oh, look, I got on the internet. Everything's here on the internet. Oh, here's a checklist. I'll just follow it. You don't want to just follow it. You actually want to prove your case and go over and above. And you want to make it so so strong that you have everything in there that it's unreasonable for you to refuse it because you've gone over and above. And I'll talk about that when we're answering questions on government forms. Again, you're in the position where you need to make sure that you're showing that you actually qualify. Yeah, I think I'll stop there because I think we'll cover some other stuff later. What should not be in the application? Okay, so what else? I'm just thinking, actually, I'm going to go back to that. What should be in the application? Another thing that we also see is that in the checklist, it'll say, oh, if this applies to you, for instance, like the letters, there's a portion near the end of the checklist that says, oh, if you haven't done X, Y, Z, then you need to supply these. We supply them anyways, right? It's for you to have that stuff in there to be able to show it. The other thing that should be in your application, and again, take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. A lot of times people will have excerpts of conversations. And they'll say, it's limited to X number of pages, blah, 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 right? I'm going to put in whatever I want because I want to show a snapshot of that relationship. And again, they're trying to streamline things through, but I don't take that risk with my clients, right? So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show that snapshot. One thing that I do tell clients is that they'll have an argument. We'll read, say, their WhatsApp or their Facebook or whatever. There'll be an argument or there'll be something in there, and they'll scrub it out. And I'm like, listen, we want to show a real relationship. And real relationships, people disagree. The government's not there to judge the quality of your relationship, or you guys might be madly in love and fighting like all the time. That's not their decision. But real relationships do have issues. Now, again, please take that with a grain of salt. But it is something that we don't, you shouldn't be scrubbing your relationship up to make it look like, look at me, I'm awesome. Like Dr. Phil would be so proud of me. So that's one thing to consider. I can't believe I just made a Dr. Phil reference. But anyways, what else? So what should not be in the application? Now, if you're overseas and you're looking to come back to Canada, you need to be really heavy on your intent to reside here. We've seen it in past where people will be making the application, but they're not making overtures to actually come in here. So you shouldn't have any indication in there that you're not looking to settle. I saw something a little while ago, and I'm not going to get into it because I want to respect the person's confidentiality. But long story short, they had an opportunity to go overseas, and they thought, while I'm processing stuff, while I'm processing things, I'm going to go and do this opportunity, and then I can come back because the processing will be done. This was conveyed in the application, and it raised a lot of red flags. And in reality, they thought nothing of it because they were being transparent with the government. However, we got a call, and it wasn't an application that we were representing. It was somebody that they were doing their own, and they came and called and was like, oh, what about this? So, we straightened it out. I'm happy to say that they're here and they're landed and they're on with their lives, but it got a little dodgy there for a little while. Okay. What shouldn't be in the application? You need to be careful about putting in too much information into the application. That's actually, it's a real balance. So you want to put enough in that you're doing it, but you don't want to kind of overdo it. Think about the person on the other end. One of the things that we do when we're preparing an application is we always think about I put myself in the shoes of the government officer, and I'm like, what would they be thinking of this? Like, oh man, like this. Sometimes when my application looks too perfect, I'm a little afraid of that because I'm like, this looks too perfect. But it's the way it is. Answering questions on government forms. I take every opportunity. So sometimes on the forms, there'll be a box there, and it'll say, fill this out if this applies to you. I'm going to fill it out anyways, because the officer has to read that stuff, and I'm going to take every opportunity that I can to prove my case and to solidify and add more information where I can. So even though it says, if this applies to you, don't fill this in, and write an NA, I don't do that. This is something that I've done successfully for years, and many people may or may not agree with me because they're like, just answer the question. But my deal is like, I want to represent that, and I'm going to continue to hammer that officer and tell them how awesome my clients are and how genuine their relationship is and how they want to live and settle here in Canada and just get on with their great life together here. Okay. I think if there's anything else, country specific requirements, again, always be mindful of those requirements because they do vary per country. And the government fees, just as a side note, we've had an increase of fees lately, so always check those. If you don't put in the right fees, your application will come back and will be returned incomplete, R10, it's not there. Same with the country-specific requirements. I think I'm going to stop there. Norbert, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Speaking of, when you look at an application and take the eyes of the officer, I mean, I do the same, and I try to go a little bit further sometimes where I try to look at this from the eyes of an immigration officer that's in a bad mood and is looking for something.
Right?
So something to trip you up. They're looking for the red flags. So that's
everybody has bad days, right?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll try to do that with an application before we submit it and say what can I find in here that would raise a flag. So yeah, it's really important though that.
The other thing is you also want to do their job for them. Like
yes.
One of the things that we didn't speak about is cover letters. That's not on. There's no indication on the checklist that you need to put a covering letter on that. But you know what? I would never send a letter into somebody or an application in without a submission letter. Like, especially as a paid representative, like I'm definitely not doing my job. And that's an opportunity to lay out and summarize your case and just give it. Like these are low balls that you're throwing to the officer. You're like, here you go, sir. Like this is it. This is what you're looking for, and I'm going to lay it all out here. Now go and look at the application and see what you think, because it's all there. All right, I think we beat that horse enough there, Norbert. Let's keep moving. So this is always the fun stuff, and this is what people always ask for: is what are some of the flags? Now, there's some really good. Well, actually, you know what? I've got a really good book here. I'm gonna shamelessly promote this. This is a book called Points of Entry, okay? And I'll tell you what, this was written by Vic Swaziak, and is he a sociology professor at McMaster University. This is a really good book, and if you're like an immigration geek and you want to read, stuff about immigration, check it out. But there's a whole chapter in here about spousal sponsorships. And it was really unprecedented where he actually got access to the visa offices, and he actually, sat down and he got to see behind the curtain, if you will. And what's interesting about this book is the level of, I think when he did the spousal portion of this book, I believe it was in India, and he was looking at the level of scrutiny that was going through the application. There was also an article that was done about 2015, I think it was, by Nicholas Kyung in the Toronto Star, and it was about a lot of the different flags. And I bring those up because, again, when you look at this application online, and any application for that matter for immigration, it always looks so easy and straightforward. But if you actually look at the stuff and the scrutiny that the officers actually put into your application, you need to take it really, really serious. So getting into those potential flags, again, I can give you a list like that long. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go over some of the bigger ones for you. So misrepresentation or inadmissibility. So we touched on that. Now, misrepresentation is when you've actually lied on an application, maybe either to Canada or to another country. If you've lied on an application to another country, make sure that you do not hide that as well if you're asked the question, because these computers, they're interlinked like spousal relationships as well. There's a lot of information that is transferred, especially between Canada and the US, for instance. And also, I know we have some people here from the UAE. Those computers in Canada, they talk. Okay, so just if there's stuff on your application or you have an issue, maybe get some professional advice on that, because once you fire that bullet into the immigration department, you're in, and you got to make sure that you're not shooting yourself there. Undeclared or non-accompanying family members. Okay, so again, you always need to make sure that you're declaring your family members. Otherwise, under family class, they'll be excluded from sponsorship. There's a regulation called 117.9D, and basically what it says is if the person isn't examined, like i.e. a medical exam, and all the other stuff, forever removed from the application. So these are very serious issues. Also, the officer might wonder, why is this person not being declared, or why are they not accompanying, or different things like that, and it might lead into some more questions. Genuineness of relationship. I think we've already dealt with that a little bit. Again, I'll do this with my hands, the interconnected. We want to see that it's a genuine relationship, and that ties into the development and length of the relationship. Norbert actually had said that a little while back in our conversation here, and he was talking about how what we'll ask people about their relationship, and we want to know how it's developed. Does it make sense from the place that they come from? right? So, for instance, you might have arranged marriages in certain countries. You have matrimonial websites. What is the norm for that country and what makes sense? Um, how long have they been in a relationship? Yeah, we met and we got married like, in a couple weeks. Now, when we do our initial intake of the person, we're not here to judge. Like, everybody has different things, and quite frankly, we have sponsorships going through right now where, people have only known each other for a couple months, and they're fine. Like, they're approved and they're off to the races. But it's all contextual and it's how it's articulated. So again, the officer will be looking at length of the relationship. How did it develop? What is the interconnectedness of it, et cetera, et cetera. Missing information. If there's a hole in your application and there's a glaring hole, why is that not being addressed? This is where the officer will look at it and will start to, be like, that sounds a little interesting. Why don't we delve into that a little bit? And that's where, again, when Norbert discussed about the interviews, we always say that our job is to keep you out of the interviews. And that's something that you do not want to go, because they're not having you come in just for a little chit chat. So you want to make sure if there's a hole in the application, why is it there? How can I explain that? And you want to be proactive. You want to be ahead of this. You don't want the officer drawing their own conclusions, saying, well, I'm not really satisfied on this. I don't really have to sign off on it. I want to know more, right? Previous applications and or refusals. So whenever you get a refusal across any application with Canadian immigration, that will be on your record for 9 years from the last interaction with the department. There's a number called the UCI number. So previous refusals. So if you have that, you have a UCI number, which is a unique client identifier. That's going to stay with you across all applications forever. So previous applications, where this can be an issue, and I'll give you an example, is somebody's filed a student application and then they filed a work application and now they're filing a spousal sponsorship. If I'm an officer and I want to look at something, I might be like, there's a lot of applications in a lot of different programs. Is this a genuine relationship? And again, if there's different applications like that for different purposes, then we're going to look at that and we're going to address that right from the get-go. All right, I'm going to move on there because I want to be mindful of the time. Complexities, previous relationships, divorces here, kids there, especially undertakings of people like sponsoring from overseas. That's something that we're going to look at really seriously because, again, they call it marriages of convenience. And basically, they're sham marriages is what people are calling them. Some places have higher percentages of those. There's certain nuances that people are looking for. Again, you want to stay away from all of that. So you need to be mindful of that. And especially if you have another undertaking, that can be that you've already finished off and whatnot. But if you're sponsoring repeatedly people from overseas, then maybe that's a question. Children from a current relationship or a previous one. So again, this can be a factor. And the complexity here, let me give you an example. You have a child. I just mentioned that the child needs to be examined, for instance. So, and when I mean examined, like medically, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe, your previous spouse, you've split up, for instance, and then she's having none of it. Child is with custody. These things get very complex very quickly. So is a child going to be able to get a medical? Do they have the ability to do that? Is the person that's the primary caretaker going to take that person for a medical or even allow it? We've seen all of this stuff before. This is very real. Children from current relationships. A lot of people think that, we have a child together, so this is a genuine relationship. No, okay. And the reason is like who knows? And again, I don't want to belittle anything or whatnot, but you might have hooked up at met at a bar one night, had some drinks, and here's Johnny, right? Here's the little baby, right? And then you're a good person and you want to do the right thing, for that doesn't make it a real relationship. It just makes you doing something that you believe is chivalrous to that, or something that you're being pressured into. So again, having a child is not a home run, and a lot of people think that we got a kid. We hear that a lot. Oh, we have a child together. So this is no, that's not always the case. Sure, it does show that you've been intimate with each other. However, that's not a be all and end all. Financial requirements. Again, there is no financial requirement per se in terms of you have to have a job and making money under Section 39 of the Act. None of that. However, you need to show that you have the ability to support. And when you're getting into kids and all of the other stuff, then different financial requirements will come in. I'm not going to get into that because that's a whole different layer of complexity. And we could talk for another 40 minutes on that. Overseas police checks and debts. Okay. My friends in the UAE, if you have a debt that's outstanding, for instance, the authorities were using the police, or not the authorities, private companies were using the police as a mechanism to get paid back on debts because you couldn't get a police check if you didn't have something cleared. This has always been an issue in certain countries. So you need to be aware of that. That will hamper your application. And we've seen it a couple times over the years, specifically from UAE, and not calling anybody out. That's just the system. So you need to be aware of that with the police checks or anything that's outstanding that might come back to kind of haunt you, if you will. Called in for a chat with your friendly immigration officer. So this is what we were alluding to. We want to keep you away from the interview. That's what we do, is we want to answer all those questions so that they don't have other questions for you. And normally how this goes is they will bring the two spouses, the sponsor and the principal applicant in, and they'll give them an interview, and it'll be recorded and they'll be separate. One could be at the visa post where the person is. Another one could be at an inland office here in Canada. They'll start asking you questions. They'll match it up. And there's a number of different questions that they're going to ask, and they're going to look. They're looking for genuineness to the relationship. And by all means, if you're watching this at any date and you've been called in for an interview, please do not try to tackle that one yourself, because they are not bringing you in to have tea with you. They are too busy. Immigration is too busy. And they're not just checking in on you just to say hello. They have issues with your file, and that is a huge red flag for them to, either dot their T's or T's I's, whatever they want to do. Friend of ours she's an old immigration officer, and her training officer, when she was doing it, when she was learning how to do interviews at an overseas visa post, they basically said, give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves, right? And there's a lot of truth to that, because a lot of people will go in there, and if there's anything to hide, they will uncover it, and they're trained to do that. So again, if you're in this spot, please reach out to us, because you could do some damage that you won't be able to come back from. All right. I know, doom and gloom, scary, but it's really not. And most people don't get to that point, but if you do, yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. If you've watched any of my other presentations, I always keep this slide in there as a standard slide. And the reason I do is because I firmly believe that everything I do, a lot of times people think, he's an immigration consultant. He just fills out paperwork. I can do all that. If that's what you think we do, that's nothing what we do. But what we do is we think very strategically from the beginning, and we take an endpoint. You've seen me say this a lot. Here's my endpoint. This is what my goal is and my objective. And then we back it up and we plan that so that we can get that. It's huge. And that's what you need to do to truly be successful in any immigration application. Again, you can get on private chat rooms and, oh, this worked for this guy or that. Please don't do that, because everybody's situation is unique. Okay. I'm pretty much going to stop there. There is a few questions. I was actually messaged, because we advertised this. Somebody messaged a question, and we have one here from Ola. Ola, is immigration accepting application for spouses of international students who will be issued an open work permit? What specific documentation do we have to prove? Okay, that's a good question. It's not really related to sponsoring a spouse for immigration purposes, but I get it. It's topical. So yes, immigration, if you are here as an international student, you can bring a spouse and get an open work permit. And the specific documentation, again, there's a checklist, but if I believe you were here at the beginning of the presentation when we were saying that the checklist is just the checklist. When you're doing open work permits for spouses of international students, you want to be careful, and you also want to make sure that you've addressed some of those things, because depending on what you did with your original application, or if you're applying together, there's some different nuances that you need to be aware of. So documentation, we don't really answer that question in terms of, we talk in general terms. But the reason we don't do that is because we don't have a standard checklist. Like, we have a standard checklist that is a starting point for us, but we really believe that everybody's application is unique. And we have different list of documents for everybody. Right, Norbert?
Yeah, right.
Jump in here anytime, man. Like, I'm just going to go. I got another question here that I wrote down. What if I'm married to two people? Who can I bring to Canada? Right? All right. This is we get this question a lot, because in some places you can have up to 4 different wives, right? Some countries. So in Canada, you obviously can't. What you need to be aware of in that respect is that Canada only recognizes the first marriage. Okay. It's all they're going to recognize. Okay. So if you've got 2 or 3 wives and you're like, man, I don't really like the first one, I'm going to go with, number 2. It doesn't work like that. You're going to have to do a divorce, or it gets pretty tricky depending on what your spot is. So that's actually a great topic for another day. Thanks, Ola. You know what? I have the ability here to put this on the screen. So that was Ola's question before. I should have put that on there. And then she gave us a thank you. So hopefully I answered your question. Look, if you want to reach out to us with that, or you're having some challenges, by all means, please do that. But we just keep it kind of general in nature. And I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy Lennon there. Thanks, Lennon. I appreciate the great info, and hi to you. And I love the picture. I guess we're playing some guitar. So hopefully everybody's safe and everything there. Does anybody have any other questions at all? We'll hang out for a few seconds here, a minute or so. If anything pops in, we'll try to answer it. If not, we're going to let you go and let you get on with your day. So is there anything you wanted to add, Norbert?
No, I'm good. I think we covered a lot today. Yeah, more questions would be great, but yeah, I think we're good. I think we've got.
We love that, eh? We're strange like that. I think we liked talking about immigration a little too much.
I think we got across that this is not a simple thing that you can just do by yourself. Like you've said, it's got to be planned out.
Yeah. And again, you don't want to fumble through the process. A lot of times, we see people like our clientele. They're either going to be people that are planning ahead, people that have tried it and been like, whoa, what happened here? Like, maybe they submitted something or it come back. Or we've got people coming in here crying their eyes out because they've made a mess, and sadly sometimes we can't fix it. So yeah, you know what, why don't I do this? I think we'll wrap it up here. I'm just going to put our contact details and everything up there. for everybody. I'll just put that on actually. Yeah. So that's that. If you want to reach out to us, by all means, feel free. Obviously, you're watching us on Facebook or you're seeing this on Facebook. By all means, feel free to reach out to us. And I had a great time. How about you, Norbert?
I had a great time.
It's fun, right?
Let's do it again.
Yeah, we should do it again. It's fun.
We could go on for another hour about family sponsorship.
I know. It's fun, though. Anyways, listen, guys, we'll leave it at that. I think the Cane's coming out to pull us off the stage now, Norbert. So let's do it at that. We'll talk to you soon, guys. Have a good one. Hope everyone's staying safe. And if you have anything at all, please reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to help out. All right. Take care, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.